Breaking news, Australia is arming Ukraine with 49 Abrams tanks. It's Tuesday, February 3rd, 2026, and this isn't just a shipment. It's a massive infusion of heavy armor. It doubles Kyiev's Abrams inventory pretty much overnight. And if you stand for freedom, if you believe in the right of nations to defend themselves, you need to pay attention. Before we jump in, subscribe to Defense Reports. It's your go-to source for timely, in-depth military and defense reports. I'm Alex. And with me is Arya for the latest Deep Dive by Defense Report. We do sharp, no-nonsense breakdowns of global defense news, military tech, and strategic developments. And today we're covering a story that honestly feels like it was ripped straight out of a movie script. It spans 15,000 kilometers of ocean, involves a secret modification to the tank engines that basically silence critics in Washington, and it features a lone lieutenant from Townsville, Australia, who reunites with his specific training tank on the other side of the planet.
It really is a fascinating story. It's about logistics, it's about politics, and ultimately it's about survival on the battlefield. We're looking at a transfer valued at, around 245 million Australian dollars. But the strategic value, that's much, much higher. This is really about a middle power stepping up when the world is watching.
Exactly. And I want to get right into this because we've seen the headlines for months. Will they, won't they? But now, as of today, the delivery is actually complete. 49 M1A1 Abrams tanks are physically there. But, I think a lot of people might hear 49 tanks and think, okay, is that a lot? In the grand scheme of this war, does this number actually move the needle?
Oh, it absolutely moves the needle. You have to look at the baseline, right? Before this Australian package, Ukraine had received exactly 31 Abrams tanks from the United States.
31. That's it. For the whole country.
That was the entire fleet. So this Australian delivery, it doesn't just add to the fleet, it more than doubles it. We're talking about bringing the total number to around 80 hulls. That's enough heavy metal to equip a full armored battalion with reserves.
That changes the tactical calculus completely. You can't really run a major offensive with 31 tanks scattered across a 1,000-kilometer front. It's just too thin.
Precisely. With 31, you have a company. With 80, you have mass, you have rotation. And crucially, these aren't just, random surplus vehicles found in a junkyard. These came directly from the Australian Army's active service. Australia's in the middle of upgrading their own forces.
Right, they're getting the new M1A2 SED V3s, the system enhancement package.
The absolute cutting edge of digitized armor. And because Canberra is moving to that new platform, it created this unique window of opportunity. They had these M1A1s, the AIM-SA variant, which stands for situational awareness. They're battle-tested, robust platforms. So instead of letting them gather dust, the Australian government decided to send them where they are needed most.
The ultimate form of recycling, really, but with a very, very serious purpose. I saw a quote from the Australian Minister for Defence Industry, Pat Conroy, that really stuck with me. He said, "Australia stands shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine."
And that messaging is so critical. This is explicitly framed as a defense of the rules-based order. It isn't just about hardware, it's about moral clarity. Conroy and the Deputy Prime Minister have been very vocal that this is about supporting a nation fighting an illegal and immoral invasion. And let's be honest, sending 60-ton tanks halfway across the globe is not something you do casually. It is a massive statement.
No, absolutely not. And that brings us to the logistics, which is a story in itself. Operation Kudu, I was looking at the map. Getting a tank from Geelong, Australia, to the front lines in Ukraine is just, it's a logistical nightmare.
It's a massive undertaking. We're talking about a 55-day sea voyage. And here's a detail I think most people don't realize. You can't just park a tank on a ship and walk away for 2 months. Salt water and high-tech electronics do not mix.
Right. Corrosion is the enemy. That salt air just eats everything.
Exactly. We have reports detailing how Australian Defence Force personnel were actually on board these ships. They weren't just passengers. They were working shifts, running inspections every 6 hours.
Every 6 hours. For 55 days straight.
Around the clock, that's the level of dedication we're talking about. Checking seals, checking the turrets, making sure everything was protected. They had to ensure that when these things arrived in Europe, they were combat-ready machines, not rust buckets.
And here's where it gets really incredible, the human element. Because for one of those soldiers, it literally was his tank. We found this story about a lieutenant named Mitchell Walker, nicknamed Tex, from Townsville.
This is such a poignant detail. So Tex is in this secret maintenance hub in Poland, inspecting the armor as it comes off the trains, and he spots tank number 51. Yes, it was the exact same vehicle he had completed his tank officer's course on back in Australia. He literally learned his craft on that specific machine. He knew how the gears shifted. He knew all the little quirks of the turret. And now, 15,000 kilometers from home, He's prepping that exact same tank to go fight in the Donbass.
That gives you chills. It really bridges that gap between a training ground in Queensland and the mud of Eastern Europe. Makes it very personal.
It does. And there were Ukrainian crew members on those transport ships, too. The Aussie soldiers spent weeks with them, hearing stories about their families. It wasn't just a transaction. It was a personal handover. Tex Walker was quoted saying, "I know this tank is going to do its job well for the Ukrainians." There's a lot of professional pride there.
So they get to Poland. This isn't just a drop-off point, right? They didn't just hand over the keys and leave.
No, not at all. They set up a classified maintenance facility. About 16 Australian specialists spent a full week on each batch of tanks. They were checking optics, weapons, turrets, everything, basically tuning them up so that the moment they crossed the border, they were ready for war.
Okay, so the tanks are ready, the Aussies are proud, the Ukrainians are grateful, but not everyone was popping champagne. We have to talk about the friction. There were reports that the U.S., specifically officials linked to the incoming Trump administration, were actually unhappy about this.
This is a crucial part of the story. You have to remember, the Abrams is an American platform. That means any transfer needs ITAR approval, international traffic in arms regulations. Washington has a veto. And the hesitation wasn't just bureaucratic, it was technical and political.
What was their main argument against it? Was it just fear of escalation?
Escalation is always in the background, but the specific criticism usually boils down to three things: fuel, weight, and complexity. The U.S. officials were arguing that the Abrams is a gas guzzler. It runs on that Honeywell AGT 1500 turbine engine.
Which is basically a jet engine inside a tank, isn't it?
Correct. And jet engines are thirsty. They typically drink JP8 jet fuel. The critics called the tank a liability in a drone war, pointing out that many of the original 31 U.S. tanks had already been knocked out. They were arguing that adding more of these would just strain Ukraine's logistics, which are already stretched thin.
Right. The argument being, why give them a logistics headache?
Precisely. But here's the fascinating twist. The Australian solution, this is the aha moment of the entire operation.
The secret modification. Tell us about it.
So the Australians, they anticipated this exact argument about the fuel. The M1A1s that Australia sent were specifically modified. They don't run on the standard jet fuel. These tanks were tuned to run on diesel.
Wait, really? You can just tune a jet engine to run on diesel?
That's the beauty of the AGT 1500 engine. It's polyfuel capable. It can run on almost anything flammable, but you usually optimize it for one fuel type. Australia ran their fleet on diesel to match their own logistics. By sending diesel-compatible Abrams, Australia effectively just nullified the American argument about sustainment.
That is brilliant. It sounds like such a small technical detail, but it changes the entire logistical map for Ukraine.
It really does. I mean, think about it. The Ukrainian army runs on diesel. Their Leopards run on diesel. Their T-Series tanks run on diesel. By making sure these Abrams drink from the same pump, they removed the need for a whole separate supply chain. It was a smart, practical fix.
So they overcame the hurdles. They solved the fuel problem. Now the tanks are in Ukraine. Where are they?
They've been deployed to the 425th Separate Assault Regiment known as Scala. This is significant because previously only the 47th Mechanized Brigade had Abrams. Now Scala has them, and they're operating in one of the hottest sectors of the front, near Pokrovsk.
Pokrovsk. That is right in the thick of it. But you mentioned the U.S. was worried about them being a liability in a drone war. Is that a valid concern?
It's an incredibly valid concern. We have to be realistic here. The attrition rate for the original American Abrams was highest, and reports suggest nearly 87% were damaged or destroyed. And the main culprit isn't other tanks. It's first-person view, or FPV, drones hitting that thin roof armor.
So how do you use a Cold War tank in a 2026 drone war without it becoming a burning wreck in 5 minutes?
You adapt. The days of the massive armored spearhead crashing through lines like in Desert Storm, those are over. Not with this level of drone saturation. The Ukrainians have turned these tanks into what they call mobile fortresses.
Mobile fortress. I like the sound of that. What does it look like in practice?
They're not rushing into close combat. They're using the Abrams' superior thermal optics and its long-range gun to provide fire support from a distance. Often at night, the Abrams can see things the Russian tanks just can't. They pop out, hit a target from kilometers away, and disappear. It's more like a sniper rifle on tracks now, not a battering ram.
And they've modified the look of them too, right? I've seen the pictures.
Yeah.
They look like something out of a post-apocalyptic movie.
It's very Mad Max. First off, they kept the Australian Oscam paint job, that distinctive camouflage.
The one with the little bunny shapes in it?
That's the one. It stands out. But on top of that, they've just bolted on everything they can find. They've added Contact One explosive reactive armor ERA blocks to the hull and sides, and then the cope cages.
Those are the big screens welded on top.
Yes, giant steel screens, sometimes with fishing nets draped over the turrets. It looks scrappy, almost homemade, but it saves lives. The nets catch the drones before they can hit the armor. There's a report of one crew near Pokrovsk taking 4 to 6 direct FPV hits and surviving because of these mods. The tank was battered for sure, but the crew got out alive.
That's the definition of resilience. It's incredible how fast warfare evolves.
Yeah.
You take a tank designed in the 80s, modify it with 21st century tech, and protect it with fishing nets.
It is. And it's not just the tanks themselves. If you just send a tank, you're sending a target. You need an ecosystem around it. And this is another area where the Australian aid package was surprisingly sophisticated. It wasn't just, here's the armor, good luck.
You're talking about the Slinger.
The Slinger. This is an Australian-made counter-drone system. Australia sent 160 of them. These are basically automated gun turrets that can track and shoot down small drones.
So the Slinger protects the tank from the drones, and the tank takes out the enemy armor.
That's exactly the idea. It's combined arms warfare for the modern age. You have the Slinger on a truck nearby, swatting the flies, the drones, while the Abrams focuses on the heavy lifting. It's a symbiotic relationship.
And there's one more layer to this, right? Something way up in the sky.
The E-7A Wedgetail, it's an airborne early warning and control aircraft. The Royal Australian Air Force deployed one to Germany. Now, it's not flying over Ukraine, that would be too risky, but it's patrolling the logistics corridors in Europe.
What's the mission there?
It's the eye in the sky. It monitors the airspace to ensure that the aid, the ammo, the fuel, the tanks themselves actually gets from the Polish border to the Ukrainian depot safely. It protects the supply lines.
It's just impressive when you look at the total package. It's not just, here are the keys to a tank.
Yeah.
It's the tanks, the drone killers, the radar support, and the diesel engine mods. It's a roughly $1.7 billion ecosystem of aid.
It is. And of course, the Russians have noticed. Their embassy in Canberra issued a furious statement warning of serious consequences and predicting the tanks would burn. They labeled it a proxy war. But, despite the rhetoric, the transfer happened.
It really highlights the role of these middle powers, doesn't it? We always focus on the US or Germany, but here's Australia, an island nation in the Pacific, having a tangible impact on a ground war in Eastern Europe.
It proves that in the modern world, security is global. You can't just isolate a conflict. If the rules-based order breaks in Donbas, it weakens security in the Indo-Pacific. That's the calculation Canberra has made. They're betting that helping Ukraine hold the line is in their own national interest.
So what does this all mean for you, for the listener? Why should you care about 49 tanks in Pokrovsk?
Because it shows that democracies can still mobilize. It shows that despite political gridlock in some capitals, there are nations willing to step up. These tanks are buying time. They are saving lives. They are holding a line against authoritarianism. And the fact that they're running on diesel, protected by fishing nets, that speaks to the human grit behind this war.
It certainly does. And it leaves us with a final thought to mull over. We talk so much about high-tech weapons, hypersonics, AI, cyber. But right now, in February 2026, the line is being held by heavy steel, diesel engines, and the ingenuity of crews welding scrap metal to their turrets. It makes you wonder, as technology races forward, are we relearning the lesson that warfare is and always will be about adaptability and sheer will?
That is the question. And I think if you look at the Scala Regiment in Pokrovsk, you have your answer.
You've been listening to Defense Report by Alex and Aria, where we analyze the latest in military strategy, global defense, and advanced weaponry. Okay, subscribe to Defense Reports, your trusted source for timely, in-depth military and defense analysis. We'll see you next time. Keep supporting us so we can continue bringing you the latest developments from Ukraine and around the world.